Hi, Simona. It's me, John Clifford, and I'm here to answer your questions. So let me read them and see if I can do this. Dear John, you were a principal dancer and choreographer with the New York City Ballet during the directorship of George Balanchine. In a dynamic and creative time when ballet history was being written. And you were a part of it. Yes, I was. You left the company at age 27 to create your own company in Los Angeles. 46 years later, you bring out your memoirs, considered by all the many memoirs of Balanchine's dancers and colleagues, quote, the one that tells us the most. Terry Teachout, drama critic of the Wall Street Journal. So you ask, why now? Well, actually, it wasn't now. I started this thing in 1986 when Balanchine had been dead only a couple years, and my good friend and music director of my Los Angeles ballet, Clyde Allen, asked me to write down all my memories while they were still fresh. So I did, and it took me quite a few years to find the right publisher and to get the book the way I wanted it. I was in no rush. But the last couple of years with the scandals about Peter Martins and New York City Ballet coming out, there was this kind of misinformation that made it all look like it was something to do with Balanchine. That the girls were asked to be very thin and that there was sexual pressure on dancers, and this was not true under Balanchine. So I thought I wanted to get my book out now as quickly as possible to counteract and be an antidote to all that poison. It made me furious, all this misinformation that was going out there about Balanchine. So that's the reason I got my book out now. It's called Balanchine's Apprentice, from Hollywood, where I was born and danced on television and acted and everything, to New York and back. So the book is about mostly my years with Balanchine and the New York City Ballet during a really great period of the company. Jerry Robbins returned to the company. We did the first Stravinsky Festival where Balanchine created more masterpieces. And then I came back to Los Angeles to start my own company. But I still was invited back to New York City Ballet. Balanchine had me coming back for quite a few years to guest in a lot of ballets that I specialized in. And he gave me all of his ballets for free with my Los Angeles Ballet. So I had a really great time and a great relationship. Next question, what is the ideal structure for a ballet school, for a ballet company? Well, structure, let's see. It all comes from the top. It comes from the director, whether it's the director of the school or the director of the company. Now, not every director of the company has to be a choreographer. I think it helps, but it doesn't have to be. But the director of a school or a company must have knowledge. They can't just be someone who's been a popular dancer or a star dancer. That doesn't mean every star dancer doesn't have knowledge. Even some very talented, brilliant star dancers are not suited to direct a company or a school. Unfortunately, if they have the name value, they get hired to be the director of the school or the company. And they end up basically being worried if they're raising enough money or about the critics, because to keep a board happy or your audience happy, but mostly the board of directors and critics, you need to hire choreography that's popular at the moment, so you can run around in a circle like a hamster in a cage, trying to please everybody except what you should be doing, which is developing dancers. The best directors of schools and companies know how to develop talent. That's much more important than being a choreographer. It's even more important than being a teacher, although they should be able to teach. But a good director of a school or company has to have that gene. I don't even know if it can be taught, but they have to have the DNA where their first love is developing the dancers and knowing how to bring out the best in a dancer. And I've seen many a very talented young dancer ruined, literally ruined, by inept artistic directors of companies or school directors that are martinets, meaning little petty dictators, and so ideally, and it's not easy to find, but you need a director of a school or a company that loves the dancers like their family, like their children, that really wants the best for them, is strong enough to push the board of directors aside sometimes or ignore the critics sometimes. That's very important to know how to do that. politely but firmly, and knows how to nurture. So even if you were a great star dancer, I know many that are not good directors. They don't have that warmth. They don't have that care. You give up your ego when you become a director of a company or a school. I mean, there are people that can do this, and they're running successful schools, and that's fantastic, and they turn out great dancers. So I work with one all the time in Portland, Oregon, run by two former dancers of my Los Angeles company. And when they stopped dancing, they opened their own school in Portland, and the quality of the dancers are spectacular. But this husband and wife, Jim Lane and Nancy Davis Lane, are nurturing people. They really care about all the students. And this is the right way to do it, because they turn out wonderful dancers, because the dancers all are happy dancing. They're not afraid to go to class. They love to go to class. They love to be in productions. I do a lot of work with them and do new ballets. I'm doing a new one now. And it's just beautiful to see. That gives me more pleasure than dancing, to sit in an audience and see somebody I've taught or I've choreographed for just blossom. I mean, it's a great feeling. So that's the way to run a school or company, if you can find those people. What touches you the deepest level in the art of ballet? Great question. When I go to the theater to see a ballet, I want to leave feeling uplifted. I want to feel good about being a human. I want to feel that I've seen something like heaven. And now I'll tell you a Balanchine story. He once gave in an interview that what he does and what he's trying to do is give people, the audience, a glimpse of the real world. Now, he said this plane of existence is not the real world. He said there's another world, and that is the real world. And that real world cannot be expressed in words. This is very like Taoist. It's like the I Ching, which is very interesting. But he said that this real world you can glimpse through art, through dance, through music, through great paintings, through great poetry. I knew what he meant right off, because when I was a kid, I would go to the beach all the time in Los Angeles. And I remember looking at the sunsets over the Pacific Ocean, and I would get this feeling of being one with the universe. I know that sounds tacky maybe, but I when I was 14, 15 years old, I was going to the beach every weekend and stay there through sunset and watch the sun go down over the Pacific horizon. And I remember getting this feeling washing over me every time that, this world, we humans, our existence is maybe not it. Maybe there's just something there. And it's not religion, it's not God. It's there's just something kind of, it's eternal in a way, and more beautiful than anything else. So like if you have that feeling, whether it's looking at dance or art or listening to a symphony or just a beautiful sunset or going into the mountains and seeing a beautiful vista, I think everybody that goes hiking probably can understand what I mean. So what Balanchine wanted to do, and I think he succeeded, is giving this glimpse of the real world. Not the human world, but the real world, which cannot be expressed in words. Words are too limiting. So for you dancers out there, you students, understand that you are serving a higher purpose, because what you're doing is you're bringing the real world to the public. And one other thing that might be important is that I told you that there have been studies out about the chemistry of the brain of children. Well, there have been some scientists that have reported that they may be working on a problem, or a mathematician may be working on some equation, and they're stumped. They will go to the theater or see a ballet, opera, a symphony, and they forget about their problems, and they just get wrapped up in the performance. They lose themselves for an hour or two. Well, I think that does something positive in the brain. I think it releases, um, I don't know what, neurons, electrons, synapses probably. Then the scientists have reported, I read this in a number of biographies, then they will go to bed and they wake up the next morning with a solution to the problem. And I think it's that hour or two of being taken out of themselves, not thinking about themselves, being wrapped up in a great performance and great performers. We all know this. Even, rock and roll musicians, Bruce Springsteen, I mean, it doesn't matter who. But if you lose yourself and you're watching something and listening, especially if it's every sense you're listening and watching, you do forget about yourself. You completely go somewhere else. Great films can do that. I mean, it's harder with TV because you have distractions. But when you're sitting in a dark theater and there's no distractions and all the lights are out and all you can look at is what's going on stage or on a big screen, I think there's a connection. That's why these scientists and mathematicians, the next day, it always happens. It's like all of a sudden they see daylight and they can solve the problem. So you young dancers out there, you are doing a really important job, because if you can be good enough, get in a company, takes work, but if you don't work, why? It's not worth it, right? I mean, so you want to do the work, get into a company, if you were lucky enough to get to do solos, etc., and you give it your all, don't think for a minute that it's a frivolous art form or that it's just something silly. No, because you don't know who's in that audience. I mean, you don't know who you may be affecting. I'm serious here. I'm not kidding. You don't know. And you might be doing something that's going to release some little germ of genius from somebody watching you. And boy, I don't know what could be a better profession than that. So I'm serious about this. You should be very proud of yourselves and work very hard if you want to be dancers.